It was by far the biggest upset win of the weekend, down in Stillwater with Iowa State knocking off the number 3 ranked Cowgirls. And here to talk about that win, a very interesting relationship that's forming with West Virginia, and a whole lot more, Iowa State softball head coach Jamie Pinkerton. Coach Pinkerton, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you, Philip. Appreciate you having me on. It's always great to get on and talk softball and Big 12 and the current events of the season and everything going on with our sport.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we've been trying to find a good opportunity to get you on, and I couldn't think of a better reason than going on the road, scaring the absolute daylights out of Oklahoma State for 2 games, and then finally sealing the deal in an 11-inning thriller on Sunday. I'm just being honest, like, this has been a bit of a tough season for your program this year, but then you go down to Stillwater against one of the best teams in the country. And I mean, and let's be honest here, that was 3 games that Iowa State was in all 3 games, had a massive opportunity on Saturday that couldn't quite close. And then you get to Sunday, Oklahoma State. I mean, you give Oklahoma State everything you've got. And despite them throwing out all 3 starting pitchers, getting multiple innings out of Kelly Maxwell, Iowa State's able to come away with a 3-2 win in a lot of extra innings. And how big was that win just from you guys' standpoint? What kind of impact does that have for you?
Well, obviously, as you said, this is I'm hoping it's an anomaly if you look over since we arrived in 2018 and started bringing in quality athletes to compete in the Big 12. I hope this is just a speed bump in the building of the program, but from a confidence standpoint and believing in yourselves, I think it was huge. I mean, make no mistake, Oklahoma State's very good, and I think we played like we were capable, like we had in 19 and 20 before COVID hit, the 21 regional year we had, and then last year being a bubble team. I think this is the first time we've been below 500 for this extended amount of time since the 2018 season. So I think it was more of us kind of lifting weights off our shoulder, going out playing free, and doing that more than anything Oklahoma State did. I feel like they're a very good team, as you know. Top 3 was top 3 in the Kenny Gajewski's done such a great job there, and we played pretty about as well as we can play all 3 games and had the lead in all 3. And we just caught some breaks on Sunday, and we played really good defense, which is we'll get to that and what's kind of been going on in the season with the team. But I think just the ability for us to go out, play free, and they looked like they were having fun on the diamond again instead of worrying about the result. They took care of the little things, and we always, coaching staff, this is coaching cliche, we always preach do the little things, and the results and the wins will take care of themselves. I think this weekend was proof to the team that you take care of the little things in all 3 facets, we're talented enough to win ball games.
Yeah, I think I lost count on Sunday after about the 20th double play, it felt like, from the defense. I mean, you ended with 1. It seemed like you guys racked up at least 3 or 4 Sunday. I mean, I really did lose count until I was like, there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's fortunate on our part. OSU hit some balls on the screws with runners on, and just as a runner, you always tell the runner, C-line drive through. If we get a late start, we can play base to base. And they hit some some BBs at us, and we were fortunate enough to field them, and we made some nice plays on some hard ground balls because they do run well. They're very efficient in what they do. They just had a case at the Adams, and we made plays. And like I said, it just shows what we're capable of doing when we can put all 3 facets together.
An interesting story that's kind of risen out of this weekend is Iowa State softball team and West Virginia fans. Iowa State softball, West Virginia. West Virginia doesn't have softball. Iowa State doesn't have baseball. Iowa State softball team's at the baseball game cheering on West Virginia. West Virginia fans are cheering on Iowa State. There's some sort of strange camaraderie that is formed between these 2 fan bases. I mean, what led is essentially to your team deciding we're going to go down and cheer for West Virginia, who was also playing Oklahoma State there in Stillwater on Saturday night?
Right. I mean, I really don't know a lot about it. I have a social media presence, but being the generation that I am, I'm not deep in the weeds in it. But just listening to our women talk, I guess how it started was our own ISU Barstool account. Um, After basketball lost, had put out some type. You need to talk with Leah Nelson and some of our players, but I think what happened is they put their hands. Um, they had a picture of a guy sitting on a bench after basketball, after both of our basketballs lost, and said, "There, since there's no baseball, um, we'll basically see you in the fall." I've seen the tweet, but I've slept since then. And then Leah Nelson wrote, "Well, this is awkward." And then West Virginia Barstool account said, "We don't have," and I'm paraphrasing, said, "Well, we don't have baseball. We'll adopt you or support you." And then it just kind of started taking off. And then this weekend, we caught some flack from some OSU fans, and I was at the game, but I didn't sit with the team. I was checking out the new stadium and watching baseball and walking around different things, looking at different things. Usually, I always feel my players have to listen and deal with me enough, so I was just letting them have a night off. And what happened is that these fans. One of our kids got on and said, women, I should say, they're women, not kids, got on and said, "Can you help us out with tickets?" And then their fans got on it. And then the next thing you know, West Virginia provided us with the tickets. So we were sitting in their section. So, uh, and they acknowledged us. The women were yelling for them, and then it just kind of ballooned from there. And I haven't seen all of it, but they got on the bus after we won, and to kind of support the guys, they sang "Country Roads," and then that kind of blew up on their side apparently. So, anyways, what we've got is some ISU fans are starting to support West Virginia baseball, and and West Virginia fans are saying that we're their team. So it's kind of a cool thing, some camaraderie. It wasn't meant to offend Oklahoma State fans. I'm a native Oklahoman and have great respect for Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. And I think some fans not knowing the background, wondering what the heck is Iowa State doing there, cheering on West Virginia in our stadium. There was no malicious intent. It was just the women, kind of having fun and on an evening off before we played on Sunday. And it's got quite of a groundswell. And one of the women texted me last night and said, "Hey, do you see that they've got these reverse T-shirts? They have Iowa State softball with our emblem and blue and gold T-shirts, and then they've got West Virginia baseball with cardinal and gold." And is on one of their websites, and I go, "I don't know if that's licensed or not, but I go, it's a free country." But it's just it's kind of cool. And a lot of the parents of the baseball team are tweeting on social media at our players, and the head coach at West Virginia, Coach Maisie, I think that's how you pronounce it, tweeted out thanking our players for coming, and then just hearing about the tweets that I guess back home in West Virginia, they could hear the fans, and some of the fans were wanting to know, that didn't know this is going on, how many fans do we have there? And then everybody started saying, "Well, it's Iowa State softball team." So once again, it wasn't malicious intent. It wasn't disrespectful, meant to be disrespectful to Oklahoma State. But our women had a good time, and their baseball team's running with it, and our softball team's running with it. So we're kind of cheering and supporting each other.
Look, I love it. And I would understand from an OSU fan standpoint to some extent, like,
oh, absolutely.
I don't know the backstory here. And then look, as an Oklahoma State fan, like, I love this. I think it's great. Yeah. like you have the Riot Bowl in football, but now you have two programs who one doesn't have baseball, one doesn't have softball, who's decided to kind of come together and support each other. You've got the West Virginia athletic director, Ren Baker, tweeting about it. Quote, "Is there anything more intimidating than a Cyclone Mountaineer?" Like I think this is
Oh,
fun.
I
Oh
haven't
yeah.
seen that. I mean, now we got athletic direct. Like I said, I don't have a big. I get on it and retweet things from and look at things from recruits that follow us as us coaches do. I mean, that's just the world we're in today. But to deep dive it, and I think I followed last night, Coach Maisie. I hope that's how you pronounce it. I have
Yes.
not personally met the gentleman, but it was really cool. Our women thought it was great that he gave him a shout out. So I guess I probably, when I can get finished preparing for, we have an off weekend in Big 12 we have Colorado State in town. Maybe I'll dive into that and have a little bit of fun with it.
I mean, I think you should. I think it's great. I mean, honestly, it's hilarious. It's awesome. I love seeing this very unique situation come about kind of organically. I mean, you can't force these kinds of things, and to see it in the Big 12, like, and that's the big thing for me. Is like it's good to see two different fan bases inside the conference finding ways to support each other and kind of fill a need for their own fans. That's awesome.
Well, and then for the Oklahoma State fans that might have been out at the game wondering what, there was no disrespect intended. And we try to run a classy program, and apparently the bad side of it is there's some jabs being thrown, and the intent was not because we lost Oklahoma State on Saturday. We were there cheering for Oklahoma State. This has been going on since March Madness. I mean, if you've seen it, you realize how long it didn't happen just because we showed up at a baseball game. Like I said, I didn't sit with the women. I was really taking a really look at how that stadium's put together. Very, very nice facility. I walked around the concourse and looked at their hitting facility and looking at the setup, that the corrals that they had in the outfield. I was treated with respect when I was walking around. So maybe there was just a few fans that were upset and that are tweeting, but walking around the stadium, I had fans stop me and say, "Hey, that was a great ball game today. It's been a great series so far." So I was not met with any disrespect, but apparently a couple of things happened on the exit to the bus that is unfortunate.
As an OSU fan, I do apologize personally.
No worries.
I hate to say that there's some in every fan base, but unfortunately,
yeah. Oh, I believe you're absolutely true. That's absolutely true, and I think for the most part it was a positive experience, and we try not to let a couple of fans to ruin something that's special between our women and West Virginia State's men baseball team. It's been pretty cool.
So I do want to talk about this season a little bit. Obviously, as you mentioned, this has been an outlier, an unusually disappointing year. 14 wins on the season. Postseason is very much going to be you're going to have to win the Big 12 tournament if they're going to make it back to a regional. I mean, what has it been about this year? Because I think you have built a fantastic program and a great foundation there in Ames. So what has it been about this season that has kind of led down this particular path?
I mean, I think it's, when you get right down to it, it's a sport of failure, right? And first and foremost, appreciate the kind words. But it's just been hard for us to string together games. Where all three facets are going. We've, pitching has been pretty good most of the year, and then we'll have a bad defensive game, and then we'll score a few runs, and then we'll make an error and let someone back in it, and the three facets hadn't really aligned. And if you look at our schedule, it hasn't been real easy either. I mean, we have 3 losses to number 1 Oklahoma, 3 losses to number 8 Texas, 2 losses to number 3 Oklahoma State, 2 losses to number 6 Arkansas at the time. So, yes, that's not an excuse. You got to, if you're going to be amongst the elite, which is where we're trying to take this program, where we're perennial bubble team and better, getting into postseason, which we have been up until this year, 18 and this year. You got to play that type of schedule. I think I was looking at the RPI. I think we have the 35th toughest schedule in the country. So everything was aligned to do well, but we just haven't come through. And you win as a team and you lose as a team, but it's just been kind of an anomaly that we have pitching, we don't have defense. We have hitting, the pitching has a bad day. And anyone that knows baseball or softball realizes that you got to really have a chance, you got to have two of the three, right?
Yeah.
To have a chance. So with that being said, I think our pitching staff has been pretty solid most of the year, but we get in trouble when you give free passes. A walk. It always seems like 80 to 90% of the time they score. I don't think the percentage is that high, but it always seems to happen. And our problem is we've let big innings roll up. If you look at any of the box scores, it might start organically as a walk with one out, and then maybe there's a bloop single or a hard hit single, and then there's an error, and then a home run. And we've had trouble staying out of high leverage innings, and that doesn't bode well defensively. Offensively, we are not doing anything different. I think it's just one of those years where you look at Major League Baseball, you look at softball, you look at college baseball, you look at a 4-year career of most players. There's outliers, the All-Americans like Sammy Williams, like we had, that don't really have bad years. But Michaela Ramos is driven in 50 runs a year the last 2 years. She has 17 this year. So Carly Spellhog, a lifetime 310, 320 hitter for us, hitting around 220. Angelina Allen, an all freshman Big 12 player last year, hit over 300, is hitting 180. Alicia Ranches, our shortstop, has always been around 270, 280, been a great fielder. She struggled at times defensively. She's hitting 190. So what I'm trying to say without making excuses, it's just fact and truths. You can have one player maybe have a down year, but you can't have 4 or 5. And if you look at our stats, this is the first year we used 20 players in the game yesterday. I didn't realize that until Brady wrote the story. And you look at splits, and analytics are becoming big in softball, and we used everybody, but I think 2 bench players. You have to keep one back in case you have an injury, and a couple of our pitchers. So I didn't realize that until Brady told me. He goes, "You realize you used 20 players yesterday?" And for the future, when we come out of this, and we've shown, we beat a very good South Dakota State team last week that's a top 50. Then we're in all 3 of these. And, like you said, yeah, it's probably going to take the Big 12 tournament, but if you can run the table, we can still be above 500. But we got a lot of work to do. We got a good SEMO team coming in that's like 15, 16-1 in their conference. Colorado State is a good RPI team in the Mountain West. And then, we have Iowa, then Baylor and Kansas. So if we can run the table, I think our RPI will take care of itself. But you're right, we're probably looking at having to get hot in the tournament, and that's a tall order when you know the road's going to go through Texas, Oklahoma. Well, Baylor's ranked, so it's going to go through everybody in the Big 12, but you got to get through Texas, Oklahoma State, and OU at some point in time. So we know our that we got to be near perfect from here on out, and that's a hole that we're in.
You mentioned, of course, Oklahoma State, Texas, Baylor, all ranked. I think Texas Tech is having a resurgent year in year 1 for Craig Snyder. I think Kansas is having probably their best year under Coach McFalls. I was reading D1 softball and kind of their recap of the weekend, and they made a point I agree with. I think this is the best year in the Big 12 that we've seen in quite some time, just from top to bottom. And how much harder does that make it for you guys in a year where it does seem like you're dealing with the number of struggles and issues that you are?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's softball. That's stuff that we've got to overcome. I've got to become a better coach and help our players navigate. That's the point that I was going to get to. And those we got to find out how can we build their confidence? How can we find what other teams are? I mean, what have they found that they are attacking? And we know what it is we just got to be able to make the adjustments and help our players make the adjustments. So at the end of the day, that all falls on me, and we're doing everything. But I think the main thing is I think what we saw with the win against South Dakota State, we lost game one, had the winning run. We tried to suicide to tie it and get the winning run to third, and the suicide didn't work out, and we lost 4-3, and then we came back and won 8-1 second game and played really well. So I feel like we've kind of slowly in the second half have made that climb up, and we just got to continue making that climb, being more confident, and knowing that our players and us or the coaching staff has them prepared, and they've done the work. But I think this weekend that belief's key, and I think that's what's coming back to them right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at a certain point, it becomes a mental issue to some extent.
Well, and then right, like you said, back to the Big 12. I thought, being on the committee in the past, I mean, there could be arguments made that it was the first time in 17 years that the fourth place team didn't make it, and Iowa State was fourth. And I could make the argument, being on the committee, yeah, we didn't have enough top 50 wins. We had some quadrant floor losses. Well, if you look this year, as of the last time I checked deep into the quadrants, I don't know if we have any quadrant floor losses. We might, I mean, depending on how the conferences are starting to pull other people down. But it was just a year last year that we only got 3, and obviously I'm biased, should have been 4. And after seeing how the Big 12 performed, I think we could have done. I think we could have done well too, but that's crying over spilt milk and everything, and moving on. But getting back to the conference, I think you're exactly right. OU, OSU, and Texas have been playing very good softball. Baylor, like you said, has had a resurgent. Coach Moore just does a fantastic job down there. Knowing Craig Snyder, I knew that the talent was there, and knowing his philosophy and everything, I knew that was coming. I don't know if anyone could have predicted that turnaround that quickly, but also too, they've got to go through the grind of the Big 12 like everybody else does, but I think they're doing fantastic. And like you said, Jen McFalls and Kansas has done a good job this year too. So I think top to bottom, even though we're the one below 500 right now, I would take our team and match them against anybody right now, and know that we can compete with anybody in the country.
It does seem like Iowa State's on the upslide, which is probably not the best thing for Kansas and Baylor, who you still have on the schedule toward the end of the year. The Big 12 does seem like it's on the way up. Obviously, it's going to be going through a lot of changes in the next few years. Next year, 3 of the 4 incoming teams bring in softball: BYU, Houston, and UCF. And then, of course, after a year of 10 programs, which will be fun, we're going to get to 8 when Oklahoma and Texas leave. I'm curious your thoughts on the 3 softball programs incoming, and how you feel like they might impact the Big 12 moving forward.
I think we're still going to be a competitive conference. Losing OU and Texas from an RPI standpoint, we're here with those 2 schools. Being in the conference, we've been 2 or 3 in the RPI. I think last year was an anomaly. We fell to 4 in the conference RPI, but they will be missed, no doubt. But BYU, when we played out there last year, I looked in amazement at their wall. I think they had only missed, they missed last year, but in like 20 years, they'd only missed 1 NCAA regional. So I feel like that they're bringing in the tradition, that can help the conference. They're having a decent year. They're fighting weather like we have. They were supposed to come to Ames this year, but weather didn't allow it. UCF and what Coach Ball Malone's done down there. Making a super regional last year. That's going to be great for the conference. And with Houston coming in, Coach Vesely's done a good job, and Houston traditionally is a very good softball team. So I think next year with the 10 teams, it's going to be really competitive. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be awesome. But when we have those other teams, I think obviously you're going to lose some, but you get some three very good teams coming in, and I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how it impacts the Big 12. I mean, look, there's certain conferences that get the benefit of the doubt when it comes time for postseason selection, and I think part of the problem for the Big 12, and I think this has been an issue in a variety of sports, is having fewer teams has had a harder impact, especially when you have an Oklahoma team like Oklahoma, who look, it's hard to get wins against Oklahoma. I mean, they've lost one game this year, so
Yeah.
That makes it tougher on everybody. And so I'm curious. Like, I'm very interested in how this Big 12 is going to look, especially after Oklahoma and Texas leave.
Right.
And look, I never want, and I understand the coach speak of like, you want the best competition. You don't want to see a good program leave. But I'm really curious what the impact of not having to play Oklahoma and look from an OSU fan standpoint, from any standpoint, having to be like, okay, well, that might just be 3 losses on the schedule, how that impacts the Big 12 top to bottom moving forward.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think from an RPI standpoint, it's going to hurt. I mean, those two teams, I think Oklahoma's number 1 right now. Texas is in the top 10. Oklahoma State's sitting at 3. I glanced at it this morning because I tried to prepare after getting in at 3 a.m. I knew that I had this interview, and I knew that later in the week wasn't going to be good for yourself or even me. But I just think but the flip side of that, look at how many teams got in from the Big Ten and the ACC last year. So when you have a bigger conference, and this is where it would be key if Cincinnati, West Virginia, TCU, K-State, if they would all add, if you look at the Big Ten, 12 of 14 teams right now are over 500. And last year they got 6 or 7 teams. And that's when you're playing each other. And then when you go out and play schedule and win games, a rising tide rises all boats. And I can sit and argue all day long that the Big 12 is, but then you're going to have people going, but, and it comes down to, you don't have the numbers. We're playing too many. We can't control who are in some of these conference and some of these tournaments, like this year we've played a couple of teams that have won less than 5 games. And we didn't control that, but we take the hit. And I think when you're only playing 4 tournaments compared to 6 or 7, you can control who you play a little bit more. And I can do a better job of that too. I think I overdid it this year. So I went from one way of being on the bubble, and the bubble burst, and say, okay, I've got to tweak this schedule, and then added some games. And then in some of these tournaments, turned out to have a lot tougher teams in them. So it'll be interesting if the Big Ten and everything, it's a lot easier to control who you play a lot more in 4 weeks than it is 7, because you're looking at 15 games that outside of the host, you don't know who you're playing when you enter the tournament until later on. Sometimes sometimes you don't. So that can affect RPI too. So it's an interesting dynamic. And wonder if softball and baseball will go the way of basketball and go into kind of the net stuff. I don't know how you do it in softball. I don't like the margin of victory. There's no reason to go out and beat somebody 20-1. But I don't know, if there's some tweaking that needs to be done to the RPI.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of people around college softball who don't care for the RPI. I've had some conversations about the quad system, and I'd like to nitpick it a little bit. We
Yeah.
had Coach Gajewski on last week, and I want to ask you a question that he answered, which is, if there is one thing about maybe the postseason or the RPI ranking system that you would want to change, what would that be?
Wow, that's a good question. I think when I was on the committee, this is my second year off. The home win and one thing that we have a lot that the net doesn't account for is we all play an unbalanced number, and I think probably basketball does also, but probably not to the extent that we do. We all play an unbalanced number of home and road games. What's the fine line? I mean, right now we've played 8 home games. So, what's the balance? Because we go on the road, we all know it's hard to win on the road. So, what's the balance there when you got teams like hey, if I was Arizona State, Florida International, Florida Atlantic, I'd play 40. I'd only go on the road when I had to play conference games, maybe one tournament. Um, I don't know where and that's where, as a committee, we had those discussions of can we really weigh home and away, because then it makes it even more unbalanced. And in a good way or a bad way, if you're a good road team and say like uh, when I think our first 36 games were on the road, um, some of those were neutral, but if you go out there and you win all of those, and that throws you up, and that gives the formula. I don't know. I'm kind of losing not my train of thought, but how I want to explain it is how can you make that balance and make it fair for everybody? Because then if you talk about winning, I don't know what the point system is. Should road wins be rewarded more than home wins? I think a win's a win, and then it depends on the opponent. But say that we have a 40 and 20 record, or 40 and 35 and 25 record, whatever you want to call it. And most of our games on the road, we get substantially rewarded for winning road games. I don't know. Interesting. What I mean, that's the talk when I was on the committee. Well, road wins should account for something. Home wins should account for something. But when they ran the analytics on that, it really made not that much of a difference. So that's why softball hasn't gone with it yet. But I mean, I'm sure that maybe some of those talks have gone on a little bit more since I've left the committee, and I definitely think I'd be interested. I haven't talked to Kenny about it. I'd be interested to know what his thoughts were on it.
His primary was he wants to reseed once you get to Oklahoma City, as opposed to like reseed 1 through 8, as opposed to just congrats on upsetting the 1 seed, you're now the 1 seed.
Yeah. Well, in case in point too, what was the region last year that had that Wichita State got sent to Oklahoma, right? So if you, at least I think, knowing from being in the room, and it's difficult because of all the different sites that you play at in basketball. You go and play one game at one site, and you have a smaller sample size. In basketball, we're playing 56, or they're playing 27 plus postseason or conference tournament. Same with us, 56 if you make it to that. I'd like them to seed the top 32, and there's been talk of that. But then you start getting into basketball has smaller roster sizes, so you're hauling 15 players instead of 22 to 25. So I can understand the cost level too of and I mean it's way above my pay grade, but I think if you do 32, then you're able to spread those teams, those 1 and 2 seeds out a little bit better than having. And in that situation last year with Wichita State, I mean, there was a lot of talk about it. But that's not the first time that's happened. Clemson got sent to Alabama or sent to Georgia. No, Alabama, Duke got sent to Georgia, but that was a COVID thing. I was on the committee when we had to predetermine the sites. Duke was on the outside looking in, and then they got hot. But I mean, to have Clemson go to Alabama, I believe last year, I think that's where you got to look at the 1 through 32, and that's a great idea to reseed it when you get to the World Series. But I think that going to 32 could probably cut down on some of that going into the series too. But I'd love to sit down and have a talk with Kenny about that. That's interesting.
Well, I'm sure you might have an opportunity in Oklahoma City when the Big 12 champion or Big 12 tournament is held. Coach Pinkerton, I really do appreciate your time today. You have absolutely been fantastic. Good luck.
I feel like I rambled on a lot.
No, but it's good. Like I enjoyed it. Especially you were on the committee, so it's really interesting to learn kind of how the committee works more and more. And this season, I really learned having different interviews. It's good to understand the postseason of softball even better and kind of how it's determined, because you can't fix something if you don't understand like what the flaws are. Right. It is a complicated conversation, I think.
Well, and I'll assure you, Philip, in that room, you're not just pulling names out of a hat and pulling. My second year there, I joined. They had already seeded the 16 teams, I believe, before we were finished playing in the Big 12 tournament. I get on the bus, and we had a bus with Wi-Fi. I get on the bus. I think we played at noon and was done at 2. And they had already started at 8 that morning. And I got on the bus at 2, and I was on a video thing like this on the bus with a few breaks from the time we left Oklahoma City until we got about 10 miles north of Des Moines, 20 miles from home. So that was 8 hours straight that we were on. So I think sometimes there's a misconception that it's not well thought out. I learned a lot. Would I want to do it again? I would do it if I was asked. I don't think it's something I would volunteer for, because I got a lot of hate emails and a lot of voicemails, and not from coaches but from fans, and that there's a lot more that's thought out, and the formulas that they use on the travel. To go, you can't bus over so many miles. I think it's 250 or 500 or whatever. I've been off now. I forgot the number, but that plays into how the regions are set up. So there's a lot more it goes into that the general public doesn't know. They do it. It's a fantastic job that they do, even though there's a lot of disagreements. But the best for the sport, I do know, is we tried to do what was best for the sport and what was best for everybody that we could.
I would love a mock selection committee similar to what we've seen from college football. That would be very interesting to have the opportunity to actually participate in something like that and see how it's done. Because I think a lot of times once you get in there and have to do it yourself, it is a whole heck of a lot harder than anyone actually realizes. So
right. And with is just look at the top 25 this week with the teams losing games and upsets and things of that nature. It's only going to get more difficult as some of the mid majors and programs start rising and more parity comes in. It's only going to get more difficult. So that means our sport's healthy.
That's great. I love to hear it. Coach, again, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and all of your thoughts today. Good luck to your team this weekend and through the rest of the season, sir.
All right. Thank you, Philip. I appreciate you having me.